Hello, everybody, and welcome to Breaking News edition of Pollock and Thurston. I am John Pollock alongside Brandon Thurston, coming at you twice in 2 days because we have a breaking news from the world of Fox. Rupert Murdoch, the Rupert Murdoch era coming to an end, and we are going to dissect it from all angles. Michael Wolff, of a famed reporter, has a big book on Fox coming out next week. I mean, what great timing for this news. But
92 years old. It was a great run for Rupert.
It was, yes. And with Rupert Murdoch leaving Fox, it said, you know what? Rupert era is over. So is our era of pro wrestling. We tried this thing for 5 years. It's done. So quite the day for Fox, as we got, I would say, a fairly surprising news item. First reported, I believe, by John Oran, but then officially coming out through TKO and various other outlets, that WWE SmackDown will be returning to the USA Network in a 5-year deal that will begin next year when the current deal with Fox expires, and will also include 4 primetime specials on NBC. And we can go through all of the details, but I would say let's start just at the idea that SmackDown moving to USA Network was not one of the options that seemed to be floated out there. We were hearing Amazon, we were hearing Disney. Would Fox make some last-ditch pitch? But WWE was coming at it from the side that we know what the market expectations were, and it would seem, based on the reported figures, Wall Street has not reacted well to this news. And this is just the slice of the pie that is SmackDown. We do not have deals for Raw and NXT to report.
Right. I guess it doesn't bode well for the rest of the deal. It looks like Raw is going to the open market. There's a bit of, I would say, contradicting reporting happening here. The Hollywood Reporter making it sound like it's unlikely that Raw stays on the USA Network, where it's been for most of its history. And then there's John Oran saying that NBCU is still the front runner for Raw. So I would lean slightly towards Raw not staying with NBCU. The press release says that, those makes it pretty clear that those deals for Raw and actually for NXT are both set to expire October 2024, which the NXT piece, which is minor, but the NXT piece is new to me because last I knew on the record, NXT was set to expire the end of this month in like 8 days from now.
Did we get a quiet coterminous extension for NXT, Brandon?
I think those deals for NXT and Raw may now be coterminous with everything. All 3 shows set to expire October 2024. But yeah, it's only a 1.4x increase. CNBC, which is an arm of NBCU, is reporting that the average annual value for this deal for SmackDown is $287,000. $287,000. And how does that compare to their current deal? That's their current deal for SmackDown on Fox is for $205 million.
$287 million. He's
$287,000,
which I think the stock would be in free fall if they were renewing for a 6-figure deal.
Thank you. And so that's exactly a 1.4x increase. So I don't know if they're just multiplying 1.4 times 205 million and just getting that $287 million number there. But so Raw is at 265 million. I would, I guess that's the baseline for expectation of whatever Raw gets. And it just leaves a lot of questions about who are the other potential bidders here. And John Oran has said, just things we've heard already, Disney and Amazon. I have a lot of questions about whether Disney is really going to be a player here, because what's the network that Disney would put it on? It's not ESPN. It's probably FX. But if ABC is really looking to offload a lot of their networks, which is reported that they're considering selling a lot of those assets to Nexstar, which is a company that owns a lot of local affiliates. If that's the case, why, if you're Disney, why would you get one of your networks involved in a multi-year billion-dollar commitment if you're trying to offload those onto somebody who might have a different strategy?
There's also, like, the Disney option was the one that we had floated for SmackDown. But when Raw is being, if you are to extrapolate and view Raw going to Disney, why would Disney be programming against Monday Night Football on FX? I mean, to me, like that would be somewhat counterproductive that we're going to program Monday night and throw all these millions when it will be going against our ABC programming, against our ESPN programming, both of which might be populated by football beyond this season if this is a really successful experiment. And moving Raw to another night would then be suggested, which, I mean, I don't know. The Disney one to me seems a more difficult fit for Disney. And then we look into like what are the other players here, and is NBC Universal, like how much are they committed here? Because this is a very small increase over what they have been the average annual value for Raw, but it is for one, in theory, one less hour that SmackDown is, which is another option to this. Like they are confirming this will be Friday nights, but
are they?
They have, I mean, in all of like Nick Khan has stated Friday nights, and it sounds like they are staying on Friday nights. We assume it's a 2-hour format, but they do not have the same restrictions as they did on Fox if they were to entertain a third hour, whether it is with this deal or down the road. Like it was not WWE that came to USA asking for a third hour. It was vice versa. And you would certainly think that that's had to have been somewhat discussed.
Yeah. So you're saying Nick Khan has said this. I haven't seen this. Has he said something publicly already about this?
Let's get the press release up here.
Oh, you're talking about the quote in the press release. Okay.
This was the quote in the press release, and specifically noting Friday nights.
Okay. Francis Berwick from the USA Network. And NBC Universal has been a tremendous partner for WWE for decades, Nick Khan said. We are excited to extend this long-standing relationship by bringing SmackDown to USA Network on Friday nights and look forward to debuting multiple WWE special events annually on NBC, which is something we haven't mentioned yet. 4 times a year, they're going to get a special on the NBC broadcast network.
Which was the same deal, like when they returned to USA in 2005. This was after the 5 years on Spike. They returned to the USA Network, and part of that deal was because they were left out in the cold. They made this deal with USA, gave up their stake in the ad share, but it also did come with these 4 NBC specials, and they revived Saturday night's main event. And these did not do all that well on Saturday nights, and they quickly moved them. They're like these committed NBC specials became the tribute to the troops, and
Battle of the Belts very much, right?
Yeah, I mean, this was granted 15 years ago, but
yeah,
these were not.
I wonder if they are going to be separate telecasts on a separate night, or if we're just talking about something that Nick Khan has talked about on TMT conferences, is that it could be a simulcast. He clearly wanted some sort of simulcast like we've seen in other sports. I know everybody's familiar with what happens with Monday Night Football, but it has happened in other sports and other kinds of live telecasts as well. So maybe that's a simulcast on USA Network and NBC, or maybe it is something different, but it's not clear from the press release or the information we have now.
Yeah, so that is the add-on to this deal, and yeah, it was certainly more of a left field move for SmackDown moving over here. But yeah, we had the rumored amount here from Joe Flint had reported this from the Wall Street Journal, CNBC as well. And I guess it's also as though Raw and NXT, it's not even imminent. Like they're stating like it could be a while before we get a announcement here. And it's hard to state like, are they in a really advantageous position for Raw, or is this something where they are trying to attract suitors? Like, how would you assess this? Just as like the first major deal that TKO has announced since the completion of this merger. I would not call this a home run.
No, I mean, the stock is reacting very negatively to it. As we're sitting here, it's down to $85, which is down. It was $100 this morning. It's down $15 and down 15%. So it's the investment community digesting that this does not look good, either for what they assumed the SmackDown deal itself would get, or for the outlook of what Raw is going to get. It does raise the question, if NBCU is going to get Raw as well, in addition to SmackDown, why didn't they just buy WWE when it was for sale? maybe Vince McMahon has something to do with that. Maybe owning a pro wrestling company is just not something that Brian Roberts, the CEO of Comcast, wants to do. But maybe
is Vince getting his they plateaued. Yeah. I give up the company, my majority control, and look what happens.
Yeah, maybe it's the lack of Vince being so involved that has led to a disappointing deal here. But maybe as far as the Raw deal getting done, maybe this won't get done until an NBA deal is done, because NBC probably wants NBA rights, probably will get them. According to Nick, he's hearing rumblings. When he was appearing on the Bill Simmons podcast, he said he heard rumblings that there were discussions about having WBD split one of their nights of NBA games off with NBC. Maybe that ends up on the USA Network, so that's a Tuesday or Thursday, and WBD continuing to produce those games. So anyway, the NBA games, the regular season, and all those rights are up for renewal, being renegotiated now, and maybe that big deal, which is a much bigger deal than WWE, has to get done before the budgets and the schedules are set in place, and we see where WWE goes, which will be a lower priority than the NBA for ratings reasons, obviously.
If we go with the idea that Raw, to a lesser extent, NXT not as important because it could go wherever, but Raw, let's say NBC Universal cannot come up with the amount to keep Raw, and you look at the possible destinations for Raw, does that heighten your expectation that Raw could move off of Monday nights? Like Amazon, for instance, like here you are, you're in business, you've got the Thursday night package. Amazon, it would take I think a significant more to bring a Raw to an Amazon. And are we going to invest all of this to put on Monday nights where for X amount of weeks a year, we're putting it up against the juggernaut that is the NFL? And that brings up the question, like Raw moving to another night. And I'm somewhat surprised they are so adamant on SmackDown being on Friday nights in all of this.
I suppose that could change just because it's Nick Khan saying Friday in a press release line that I don't see why that wouldn't be flexible. But if you're Amazon Prime Video, and something that Rich Greenfield's alleged analyst has talked about is about Amazon wanting to carve out these nights of the week with highly viewed programming, including now they have Thursday night football, and maybe there's other nights. Maybe they're interested in some of the NBA content on one of those nights. But yeah, it doesn't. If you're scheduling that. It's not wrestling. I don't know. Maybe it is wrestling that you want to put on Monday. It's year round. It's not like there's other sports that you're going to get that are going to do, that aren't going to be hurt as well. But if you have the other nights available, it might be better to put it on. I don't know. What are the other nights that you can think of? Well, Tuesday and Thursday might be dominated by NBA playoffs. Monday's dominated by Monday.
How are Wednesdays at 8?
Wednesdays at 8 sounds pretty good, I think. I don't know what else is airing on Wednesday at 8 that might compete with and take away from Raw, but maybe Wednesday at 8. But I suppose Thursday is the other obvious option. Although, do you want to do 2 consecutive nights? Well, they did Monday and Tuesday in 2016.
I throw it out there because I don't think it's a 0% chance Raw doesn't move to a different night, especially if it leaves NBC Universal. And if it were to move that, if I'm USA, I'm moving SmackDown to Monday nights. I'm putting it in the traditional time slot. Like, what would be preventing you from doing that? Like,
why is it called SmackDown then? Just call it Raw.
Raw down. Like at that point, like it's almost just musical chairs at that point. And if you're USA, it's like, what is the more traditional night? Is it Friday or Monday? And take your pick. I think Monday's. They have the history on that network of Monday night. I would see NBC Universal being the most loyal to Monday nights being wrestling night, as opposed to these other suitors that just would look at this and state, why do we want to combat the biggest programming that is out there for half the year?
Right. And just thinking about the suitors, Disney, I've got some skepticism because Disney, I'm not sure, is going to keep all of their networks except for ESPN for the foreseeable future within the next few years. Amazon, where we're talking about, but is Fox, I don't think it doesn't feel right that Fox is going to get Raw now instead of SmackDown. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me that you would jump from one property to the other, although maybe that's what NBCU is going to do here. But I'm leaning towards Fox is done with WWE after October 2024.
what's going to occupy Friday nights? Like Young Rock is gone, WWE's gone,
College football probably, at least Q4.
They'll be okay then with that on top of it. But
they could program more baseball in that slot too, I would think.
So it's an NXT. So we probably have had some kind of quiet renewal for a year. And do you expect like this is going to be, the two will be a package deal wherever this goes? It's like Raw is what's going to complete this deal, but it's with the impression that NXT comes with it. I don't see NXT on its own being shopped around or going to its own home somewhere.
It's something that could end up on streaming. I think we've speculated about that since the beginning of this cycle. It makes some sense maybe to have it on Peacock. It doesn't necessarily have to be on the USA Network if that's something that a partner wants out of it. But yeah, the SmackDown ratings have been really improving lately with the addition of main roster talent. And it really sustained. I mean, we didn't talk about it yesterday because the rating had just come out, but it really sustained that, at least from in week 2 with Becky Lynch. It sustained most of that huge increase that it got. So it's seeming to be a more powerful show than before. Maybe they can sustain that. My confidence in that was not great, but it's enhanced a little bit in the last several weeks or months because the ratings do continue to be pretty strong relative to what they were before. But I don't see this going to a different partner or anything like that. I see it being a supplemental piece of content that helps with the partner who ends up paying a lot of money for Raw.
We'll get to a few super chats. If you want to send them in, you're welcome to. We've already got a few already in the bank here. But when you're looking at it from the WWE side, like here you have the balance of what Wall Street is expecting for SmackDown, and you're balancing this with how much reach you can have at the same time. Like you would think that if talks were deep with Amazon, and are you looking at this that you're going for the pure value that is out there, the highest bidder wins? Like how are you balancing a streaming option versus, let's say, network is not in the question anymore with Fox gone, and cable, which certainly has it's a shaky ground of like, where is cable going to be 5 years from now? Like, how are you balancing this? And do you feel this was a compromise worth making if we're theorizing that Amazon might have had a richer offer, but not enough to make the leap now?
Right. Or even for Amazon, why would you bid that strongly, I guess, for this property? Fox is not bid aggressively for this, reportedly, and that aligns with everything else that's happened here. Maybe they were willing to give them a small increase, right? But certainly not even 1.4. So, but if you're Amazon, it's not like Amazon has fulfilled, or Apple for that matter, have fulfilled the prophecy of the tech players are coming and they're going to keep sports rights sustained and super strong and super competitive. That's not really happened. At least in the US, what does Amazon have? They have the NFL. Apple has some baseball. Apple has some MLS. They haven't come out here and really run up the price for this content, despite them having huge pockets. They're the richest companies in the world. They can certainly afford this, but they're being patient and not investing swiftly into live sports. But as far as reach, right, USA is probably in a little over 70 million homes. Amazon Prime Video there's probably more households. I venture to guess there's more households in this country with Amazon Prime memberships than there are homes that have access to the USA Network. That being said, Amazon Prime Video is a small sliver of the Nielsen Gauge donut chart that they put out. They just put one out yesterday, I think. So you can look at it. It's a few percent. It's not even as watched as Netflix is or as Hulu is. So in that sense, I'd rather have, if I'm WWE, I'd rather have one of my shows on Hulu, if it's gonna stream live on Hulu or even Netflix, than Amazon. As far as reach, we're just talking about reach, because if Raw goes to Amazon Prime Video, it's going to get, I don't know, like half the viewership that it's getting now, and that's going to have some effect on your other businesses and on your ticket sales and on your merchandise sales and on the flywheel of getting everybody to consume all the WWE content that you want them to consume. But maybe there's also an element. There's money, there's reach, and maybe there's a strategic element too of putting Raw on Amazon, in that if you have a relationship with Amazon, then you can make them a bidder for the Peacock content that you have there, and maybe make that bidding process more competitive when those rights are up. But yes, I think if you're WWE, the prospect of moving Raw to Amazon Prime has to come with more money than a cable player if all things are equal, right? Because you're losing some reach and you're losing some value there. You're losing the ability to be in touch with viewers to the degree that you are with cable, even though cable is in the decline. You know, those respective abilities to reach viewers, they're getting closer and closer over time. They will continue to, but for now, cable is still able to reach viewers more so than a major streaming service like Prime Video is.
Let's go here to a question from JB, who sends in a super chat. Do you think it's likely that SmackDown becomes a 3-hour show on the USA Network?
Could be. Finally, we'll get it.
I don't disqualify this in the least. I mean, if they were to announce, like, they have not stated like this is a 2-hour format, I could certainly see. I guess you would only look at the fact that if they were adding another hour, that would add a bit of leverage to WWE's side to jack up the price. That this would not, this $287 million average annual value, it would to me like that would be not encompassing a third hour of value. I think that would be really undercutting themselves to add a third hour at that small of an increase.
Yeah. Raw is getting 265. SmackDown's currently getting 205. Raw is getting more, but it's getting less per hour than SmackDown is. I would think if they were going to do a third hour of SmackDown, that would be made clear if that was part of a deal already. But maybe that's something they can make happen closer to the time that this deal goes into effect, or even while it's in effect, right? I think they were in the middle of the deal when they started the 3-hour Raw in 2012, right?
And what is the state of the next day rights? Like, when, like, those are up at the same time next year as well? And that,
I think that was extended to this time of the year. I would have to look. I wouldn't be surprised if that's been made coterminous as well with these.
I thought that was the case.
Rights.
Yeah. All right. We have all right, everyone's favorite here, MJ, weighing in. Unlike WWE, I'm just here to share my profits. I was early regarding the stock. I wasn't wrong. MJ taking a victory lap, I guess, on this news. Next one up is from Jake, who sends in the super chat. I don't think the Fox WWE ever reached its full potential. Had supplemental programs on FS1, and when those went away, this seemed inevitable. I wouldn't say that this, certainly I think when they moved to Fox, there was the thought, well, look at all of this cross promotion with the NFL. And they did do some crossover. And, you know, if you went into this deal, like, the number it seemed everyone was floating around was the expectation of doing a 1.0 in the demo each week. They were not doing 1.0s, but I would not say that this was a like bad relationship for either side. And we saw SmackDown, I think achieve, like, at very least is an equal in terms of how it's viewed to Raw, and for many has become like the A show. It consistently wins Friday nights, and you know how much Fox, obviously Fox was walking away from this. Like, they did not see the need to increase the amount that they were paying. But I think if WWE had been willing to stay for something close to what they were paying, I think Fox would have continued this relationship. But I certainly don't look at this as a fail of 5 years. I think WWE gained a lot from it, and Fox maybe less so, but they were able to win most Friday nights over these 5 years.
Yeah. So first, the Hulu rights have been extended to September 2024. That was news from almost a year ago. So that's expiring the same time the live rights are expiring. And as I want to think about this notion that SmackDown has had this history of being a B show to Raw's A show. I don't see. I imagine there'll be talk of this in the ether that, wow, SmackDown got a disappointing deal, which it did. That this means SmackDown's going back to a B show. I don't think so. They're separate deals. SmackDown, when it was a B show, was part of a package that included SmackDown and Raw since 2019. And really, since the brand split in 2016, it's been treated as a show that is at least closer to the profile of Raw. And I think as long as you have a separate deal for this show, you're going to treat it with the same amount of weight. I don't see it diminishing back to, say, the SmackDown of 2015 or 2014 when it was, I don't know, completely missable.
And it may be NBC Universal's only WWE property,
Yeah.
and you've got the Peacock deal with them as well. Like I completely agree with you. I think that this is a show that is going to be, treated in the same light as it is now. I mean, SmackDown, it bounced around all over the place before it finally got moved to Fox. Like you saw over the years, man, UPN, CW Network, My Network TV. They were on Sci-Fi at a period, then to USA. They moved nights of the week. They moved networks, and then finally settled. But I think this 5-year stretch, it really did solidify the show, and having the split rosters that you could sell SmackDown on its own back in 2018 was a huge key to splitting this up as well. But thank you very much for the super chat, Jake. We go to another one here from Ryan. If WWE moves off Monday and nothing goes to Wednesday, does Collision to Monday make sense? Oh my God. What is the wrestling schedule going to look like 18 months from now? This is, there's just so many what ifs that we can't answer at this point. But Raw moving to Monday, like, again, if it were to move to a different home, I could certainly see that, as opposed to staying at NBC Universal, where I think they would not want to tinker with this format. But you would have to think, Brandon, that like all options are on the table for Raw, and where it goes, I think it likely stays in its 3-hour format, but nothing can be guaranteed.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if Raw does move away from Monday, maybe that's something that AEW wants to occupy and take on. Maybe this, being on Monday night is better than being on Saturday night. There's problems with being on Saturday night, right? Just the schedule of people's lives. They tend to watch television less on Saturday night than they do on Monday night, although you're going against football in either situation there. So there's challenges in both scenarios, but maybe it is easier for Monday. But a lot of pieces could fall in a lot of different ways. Does this tell us this is a disappointing deal? The stock price is certainly indicating that. Does this indicate anything more broadly about the live sports rights market? Are we plateauing? Is the bubble bursting?
I don't think the bubble is bursting, but I think it is. I think it is contracting. I think I wouldn't go so far as to say WWE is a casualty of all of this disruption, but if you were to ask me, I think 6 to 8 months ago, I thought both Raw and SmackDown were in great positions for significant renewals. And I felt pretty confident about that. But there has been a lot of turmoil in the cable industry over these last couple of months. And I think that SmackDown somewhat took it on the chin here. I think it's an eye opener. It somewhat, I think, will give some pause to AEW entering its next set of negotiations and what kind of leverage they're going to have, and shopping their rights around as well. So I think where WWE goes, AEW will be, I think feel it even harder potentially.
Right. And I think, if we look at what other deals recently have done, I'm just looking at, deals that have been announced, let's say within the last year, or a little bit more than that. The Big Ten announced a deal in August of last year, and it was a 2.5x increase, more than doubling the deal that they had prior. If I keep looking, in October of last year, the Big 12 renewed its deal with Disney and Fox at a 1.7x increase. So these are bigger increases than WWE is getting. And I think it is sensible to compare these, even though it is football and college football that is a much bigger deal in culture than wrestling is. Nonetheless, we're looking at this in a proportionate sense, and in a sense of how much did they get an upgrade by percentage. And I think this is a lower deal. And in the stock analyst reports, we saw Morgan Stanley thinking maybe 1.8x is realistic to think about. At the time, I agreed with that. So this is under what Morgan Stanley, for one, had said was its base case of 1.5x. This is 1.4 for one of these properties. I think maybe it indicates a little bit about the gradual plateauing that we're approaching for live sports. Does it say anything for AEW? WWE got a disappointing deal. What does this mean for AEW?
For AEW, is this the death knell for AEW? I think that this ultimately will be, like, again, the big cloud over all this is these NBA rights. And I think once they sort themselves out, we know then where Warner Brothers Discovery is, like, what is their position? What is their involvement with these NBA rights, and how much wrestling is figured into their programming schedule? Like, if wrestling will not dictate what they're doing with their NBA rights. And I think it's more so when one gets figured out, then it is the wrestling that benefits. But I would state that if this deal is an indicator, it's that, WWE underperformed in the SmackDown deal, and you would have to think that AEW is in a less advantageous position, because how many bidders are going to be at the table for potentially 5 hours of original programming from AEW, the non-dominant leader in the space?
The difference with AEW is that it's currently in its first long-term deal, right? They had this like 3-month deal that was at the very beginning, and then they got renewed January 2020 for at least for Dynamite and Rampage. We know they're getting about $45 million per year for Dynamite and for Rampage. I think they're probably up to like 70 now with the inclusion of Collision. But if we think about, let's just think about Dynamite, it's 45 million. That's about half of what Raw is delivering. Let's say it's close to half, right? But they're getting, Raw is getting 265, which is what, like 5 times what Dynamite is getting. So we're talking about, Raw is doing double the viewership of Dynamite, but getting 5 times the money of Dynamite. Now, maybe it's not just all about viewership. Certainly, it's a large piece of it is viewership. But you got a W brand, and that's a really big deal, and they have this huge global reach, and maybe there's synergy value there too. But still, we're talking twice the viewership, but 5 times the money. That gap has got to get a little bit closer, and it's probably still a big enough gap for AEW to get a good enough deal so that it at least becomes profitable in the next cycle.
Yeah, and it's a great point that you raised too, in that for AEW to have a win in these negotiations, it's a much lower figure to reach. Like, if they can exceed $100 million in their next round of negotiations, I classify that as a win for AEW. And you would think, like, if they're at 70 now and, surpassing $100 million for your rights, that's an achievable figure, I would say, even in a more fractured marketplace than we were at a year ago. And you would think that is within reach for AEW, but it's going to come down to how much interest there is in the rights. How many competitive offers do you have? What are your options? That's what these negotiations come down to.
Does this make Fox a bidder for AEW? Maybe. I mean, I don't see AEW going to the Fox Broadcast Network, but there's FS1. It's not ridiculous to think about AEW on FS1. I don't know if they're really that interested in wrestling after this, but it's a possibility.
They might very well be like, we're interested in wrestling, we're just not interested in it at this high of a price tag.
Right.
Like,
you definitely get it for a lot less.
200 million, and AEW, I think they would settle for a lot less than $200 million. And Fox might look at it like, listen, we won the night with wrestling, and here's if we perceive this as a growth brand, like, Fox has to be very, very keenly aware of AEW's performance. It's been part and parcel through this. They launched Dynamite the same week as SmackDown launched on Fox. Like, they have probably monitored their growth from the very get-go. Not a crazy notion at all. I don't think there's any scenarios that are too far-fetched.
Yeah, I'm sure they were not unaware why they aired like an extra half hour of SmackDown on FS1 that one night.
Yeah, we're doing this commercial free. What is this? And we the minute by minutes would prove that we did not win this. What's going on here? We do have just some quick hits here. This will be a shorter show. Obviously, Brandon will be chatting extensively about this as he digests all of this. Sunday, 11 a.m. Eastern, patreon.com/Wrestlenomics. Always a must listen to show. we will get the reactions of Jesse Collins, Chris Gullo, and next week we will likely have we're gonna try and grab a heavyweight next week, so look out for that on Pollock and Thurston. But also coming out today was WWE confirming earlier reporting that it will be Elimination Chamber that will be staged in Perth, Australia at Optus Stadium on Saturday, February 24th. And for those that I might be breaking news here, Perth is 12 hours ahead of us. So I did ask WWE, will this be airing in the normal North American time slot? Because this is what UFC does, is they stay in the normal start time in North America. So this would be an 8 a.m. show on Sunday morning in Perth, Australia. And the response I got from WWE is that Elimination Chamber Perth, as it's being tabbed, Elimination Chamber Perth, will take place on Saturday, February 24th at Optus Stadium in Perth. Details on broadcast timings will be announced in due course. So that was a kind of a non-answer, but I'm interested to see if they cater this to the local market and put it at is this Saturday, February 24th in Australia, and therefore airing like Saturday morning our time.
And it's 12 hours difference versus US Eastern, he said,
yes,
right?
Yeah, from US Eastern.
So for it to start any later, you got to start it at 9 or 10 local time.
Yes. Yeah. I would think, like, again, the UFC, like, and UFC, they just did their 293 card and they filled the place, and the fights were starting there at like 8 in the morning. Like, it was like it's a ridiculously early time, but conversely,
Beast in the East in Japan, when I remember like waking up at like 5 a.m. to watch that or something.
That's right. They did that one. So interesting to see what the start time is. But I mean, this is certainly a big site fee that WWE is going to be garnering for this. UFC has just completed the first of a 3-event deal that's worth $16 million as a comparison to what they are getting per event for a UFC pay-per-view. And I would imagine WWE, probably not that level, but probably not too far off as well.
And this press release says, in partnership with the Western Australian government through Tourism Western Australia, mentioning that right off the bat, pretty clearly indicates that the tourism organization of the government in Western Australia, I'm sure paid a hefty subsidy to get this event there, which is consistent with reports leading up to this.
So this would mean that over the next few months we have the Saudi Arabia show, which usually Saudi Arabia, I guess it fluctuates. In the past, it has been that February show, and I would imagine that this is probably Saudi maybe happens in the spring next year. But you're looking at the Royal Rumble in January at Tropicana Field, that we know is in partnership with local authorities. We have this show now in Perth, Australia, WrestleMania in Philadelphia, which is its own entity. Then your 2 Saudi shows. So this is, they are moving towards this goal. Like, they want all of their shows to be able to attract these site fees, and this would be getting 2024 off to a pretty big start in that regard.
Yeah. So like this year, I doubt there was a site fee associated with Montreal Elimination Chamber. Could have been 2 nights, but I doubt it. Royal Rumble in San Antonio, there was. They won't disclose what it is. I'm sure for WrestleMania this year in LA there was. Don't know what it is, but there was backlash. Yeah. It'd be interesting to see if they're able to fill out the rest of these. And it basically needs to be, I don't know, somewhere not in the continental United States for that to happen.
Is this a government-run stadium in Perth? Are we aware of that yet?
It's a good question.
We'll find out.
We're looking that up later.
Do we have an Australian version of youshouldknow.com or whatever public disclosure there is? That's now on the FAQ attached to all of these WWE Premium Live events. Yeah. But there you go. So that was quietly was announced this morning, although we knew that announcement would be forthcoming. All right. Any other thoughts, Brandon, just on the news this morning, and what might you be looking at on Sunday? I imagine this will dominate the discussion Sunday morning.
Yeah, unless something bigger happens, and we'll talk about that. We talked about Vince McMahon yesterday for Pollock and Thurston, if you haven't listened to that already. And there's a lawsuit, 2 lawsuits maybe, between Panini the trading card licensee for WWE, or maybe they are, maybe they're not. Depends on who you ask. And WWE also trying to get an injunction to get them to stop selling WWE trading cards. They want to start working with Fanatics, it looks like. So I'm sure we'll touch on that as well.
They want a lump sum. They want to not continue. They don't want to end this deal, which has like 2 years left. I mean, it's more than 2 years left. Yeah, that was a fairly wild lawsuit that Brandon went through the notes on. So yes, Panini and WWE at war. And from just from your notes, like it sounded like from Panini, like they're just getting whacked around here, and they're like, "Hey, we still want to work, but we want to finish this deal." It's like I think this is a pretty broken relationship at this point.
Yeah, I mean, they seem to be pretty happy, as you were talking about last time on the Post Dynamite show. They seem to be pretty infatuated with Fanatics and want to work with them going forward. Yeah, we only really have one side of the story here. I've asked around, and I'm told that Panini was caught off guard, but I'm not really sure what WWE's side of the story is here in terms of why they're.
I feel there has to be more than just
right.
It's a very one-sided perspective that we have seen so far.
You get from Panini's complaint that they're trying to make a claim that there wasn't a good W was trying to make a claim that there wasn't a good faith effort to produce trading cards and digital trading cards, and they were trying to get out of the contract based on that provision within their contract. But more on what their case is and why they think that's justified isn't clear to me yet. But maybe we'll learn more.
All right. For more, check out patreon.com/Wrestlenomics. Brandon will be live Sunday morning, 11 a.m. Eastern time. You can also follow along from all the news that is going down at postwrestling.com. So thanks to everyone for their super chats. I'll take one last look here. We went through all the super chats. So thank you for sending those in and tuning in live. And thank you for tuning in for a breaking news edition.
Do you see this one here? I don't know if I can only see it. Did we do this one from Nick NP?
No, we did not get to
okay. We'll
Nick
do it now.
Since the new company ideally wants WWE and UFC on one streamer, not sure if Peacock can afford both pay-per-views past March of 2026. Well, I do not see UFC. I think they have a really great situation with ESPN Plus at this point. And conversely, I think ESPN Plus has a really great thing going with UFC pay-per-views there. I don't see UFC moving off of ESPN Plus. I think it would take quite a lot to move them. But I think it is not so much these next set of television rights for WWE and UFC, but rather the streaming deals that you could look at. Could this be the first time that they negotiate these together as a package, as your combat sports pay-per-view offerings, that they kind of have this marketplace to their own?
And they've been clear that that's an option that they're going to consider. It may or may not end up with WWE and UFC on the same streaming platform, but the advantage is that at least that's an option. Whether or not they do end up on the same platform, they may still be able to leverage a better deal because they just have this option in their pocket to offer.
One step towards every WWE fan becoming a UFC fan and every UFC fan becoming a WWE fan, as Lawrence Epstein has theorized, is the goal.
Yes, we're going to convert Dana White before this is over.
Dumbest statement ever said from Dana White. All right, everyone. Thanks again. This wraps up our breaking news edition of Pollock and Thurston.